Hello there. My name is Zach Fierce, and welcome to In the Lounge. Today we've got Brian Crick, and we'll be doing a quick Q&A about game development, shaders, and his game Tinselfly. Brian, thank you very much for coming to the show. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
A pleasure to have you, my friend. Brian is a friend of quite a few years of mine. We've been working on game development together, and we are both working with a shared publisher of Whitethorn Digital to get our games published and out there.
Nice.
So, Brian, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I am a full-time Unity developer doing a research project, like think educational software type stuff, for a nursing school out here in Cleveland. It's actually it's simultaneously cool and really, really depressing if I tell you the details, but just think of it as educational software. And it'll get to go. It's for helping people talk to their doctors and things like that.
Hmm,
And in my spare time, I'm also a Unity developer, working on Tinselfly and some other smaller projects here and there, but almost entirely Tinselfly at this point. Ever since I signed on um, with our shared publisher here. Um, and yeah, so my game is called Tinselfly, which is sort of an adventure game type of thing.
awesome. We've got some screenshots of TensorFlow in the background. I can show us some more here. And I don't know about you folks, but I am, I really enjoy this kind of style that Brian has going. It's pushing HDR in Unity, that's for certain. And when it comes to visuals and just this futuristic space, almost a retro aesthetic, you've got
Yeah, I
something
think
very cool going on here.
kind of retro futuristic kind of thing going on here. So, which used to be plot significant, but to be perfectly honest, I forget why. Um, and it just kind of became the aesthetic of the game. I've been working on this so long, I kind of forget why I made many of the design decisions I made, unfortunately.
So, I guess I should lead with the question I say I always ask.
Mhm.
Uh, how did you get started in making games?
So people ask me that a lot. It's a very difficult question to answer because I've been doing things that are games or game related literally since I could type. So we're talking like kindergarten here. So my family's first computer came with a book on computer programming. And when we got it, I just kind of read through the book and started learning programming that way, and like modifying the programs they had in there. And I'm going to date myself here. We got magazines about programming where you could type in the programs from the magazine, just copy them, just read them from the magazine and type them into your computer. And kind of, I could change the graphics, like make simple changes to the graphics, like change the fonts and things like that. And that's really how I got started. My dad was a computer programmer, so obviously, much of that comes from him. So,
Mm, I had a
and
similar upbringing with two parents in doing programming and hardware, software development. So I know what it's like to grow up with this stuff everywhere.
oh, nice, nice. I didn't know that. Cool.
So copying stuff right out of magazines, and we're not talking, you're typing this in by hand after reading it, right?
Yeah, and is very, very prone to typos and things like that. And you're not debugging so much as like I don't know, proofing it. It's like if something goes wrong, you just have to reread everything and say, okay, oh, I missed a letter here, or this line number was wrong because everything had line numbers back then. So
Oh gosh.
yeah,
Well, that's a surely a, uh, a quite involved way to go about it back then, but a
it is. But at the time,
wonderful.
I didn't
Hmm.
think anything of it. It was what it was. And I enjoyed doing it. So
Perhaps I'm just spoiled with copy and pasting from Stack Overflow these days.
yeah, yeah.
Very cool. Well, hey, if you are in the chat right now and you've got some questions for Brian, please leave them for us now. And in the meantime, I would be happy to ask anything and everything about your work. We've got a question from Absolutely Average asking, what do you use to record gameplay?
I use Fraps, which is available free. I think a lot of other people use it too. I haven't tried much else. It's the first thing I found, so it seems to work pretty well.
Easy enough. Man, I know we were recently asked to record a lot of high quality video. Did you approach that with Fraps or OBS or?
No, it's just Fraps. Yeah. I don't unfortunately know that much about OBS at this point. I've used it like twice maybe for my two little test Twitch streams, which I do need to get back to. But yeah.
Sick. No worries. I'm looking forward to some of these streams. I'm not sure I've got you on Twitch, but I will make sure to follow you and leave a link for everybody else to follow after
Thank
this.
you.
All right. So, speaking of Tinselfly, we've
Mm-hmm.
got these incredible environments. I can't imagine how many objects go into a scene in any sort of professional production of a video game environment. When you're
Mm-hmm.
building these scenes, where do you start? Do you have concept art? Do you white box things out? Do you start with a tea kettle and work your way up to the kitchen?
I start with very, very little, honestly, before I just kind of dive into Blender most of the time. So I have a vague idea what I want to accomplish. So you mentioned the kitchen. Let me talk about the kitchen.
Hmm.
Um, I wanted something kind of Wizard of Ozzy.
Hmm.
For that. This sort of farmhouse, and I don't know if you can see it in the slideshow up there, but there's this outside. You've got this farmhouse above a gas giant, and it's on the gas giant has rings. So you see the rings above the farmhouse, and the rings are kind of rainbow colored. So that immediately led me to like Wizard of Oz. So a lot of this is just about like noticing patterns in there, and it's not really designed so much as just built and edited over and over and over. So for the farmhouse, I just started with I don't think I did anything on paper.
Really?
I just went into Blender and made some basic shapes for the outside of the house because I wanted this kind of quirky, wacky house that made very little sense. So I just kind of went into Blender and just played with some basic shapes and built the house very much from the outside in, and just filled in the rooms as I went, as it made sense. And just it's really a process about looking at what I've got and reacting to it, and just kind of going from there. And I'm just kind of winging it, really. But it's very controlled kind of winging it, because I can't, I can do sketches and stuff, but they're not very good sketches, and they're not that useful. I literally can't imagine anything like. If you tell me to like try to visualize something, I can't do that. So like I just kind of start in 3D because I can't really think in 3D terms, and that's really the easiest way for me to do it, is just to start with 3D objects and kind of go from there.
Interesting. That's what a natural approach to things. I imagine it's something like I've never owned a house myself, but I have many times rearranged my room, start
Okay.
setting a few key items in the room and saying, what else needs to be filled? What should go where? I'm not
Yeah.
planning everything out ahead of time. I'm looking it over and, like you said, reacting.
Yeah. And since you mentioned having a house, I mean, I have a house here, and you'll notice that there are some similarities between my living room and the living room of that house in Tinselfly. So the walls are kind of the same yellow,
Hey, make what you know, right?
Yep, exactly. I've kind of started. So the process I've just described to you, I mean, it has worked in terms of getting stuff out. It is not what I would call efficient at all. I'm trying to improve that. Again, now that I've signed on with a publisher, I have to think in those kinds of terms. So I'm kind of looking at like, there's a new environment I've made, which not too many people have seen at this point, but it's this sort of like casino kind of place. And I was looking at one very specific environment, and just looking at the details in there. And you were asking about, did I start with a kettle, for the kitchen? So yeah, I was looking at this picture of this one casino and kind of focusing on that. It was a restaurant kind of thing. Sorry, a restaurant. And using that as the template for casino. I was looking at that and just kind of cataloging, okay, what else in this scene? Okay, I see, tables, I see chairs, I see drinks, I see, little tacky little lamps and everything, and just kind of make a list of all that and then kind of translate that into my story and my universe. And that has been working very well. I've been able to knock out that environment much, much more quickly with that kind of process, with just using looking at source material instead of trying and failing to imagine what might be in these scenes.
I've heard that many game developers and artists and animators love using that technique. They'll go to the locations, they'll take pictures, they'll surround themselves with an environment, and then just go back and pick and recreate what they enjoy, what they feel like fits. And frankly, that seems like the best way to do these things, right?
Yeah.
Surround yourself with just the stuff that you're trying to make and kind of shape it to your own little requirements. And
Absolutely, I've taken a lot of photo references of places I thought were cool. Like there's a local submarine museum in town that I've been to a couple times and took a lot of reference photos of that for the spaceship in my game. I've actually been to Paris, took a lot of pictures there as reference for the big floating city in the game, stuff like that. Problem is I always forget what photos I took and they're not very well organized, but but it has been helpful.
Awesome. Oh, that's cool. Have you traveled much?
Not a whole lot. I think there was just a hiccup there. But yeah, you're asking if I traveled much. Not a whole lot. I've been, let me think. The last place I went to that was really cool was New York City. There was a aircraft carrier museum there. So Marie and I, my wife and I, we went to that museum and again took lots and lots and lots of photos, reference photos of what that looked like, and I just love going to New York City. So
awesome. So lots of all sorts of different references here for Tinselfly. So environments in Paris, this submarine museum. I don't think I've been there. That's here in Cleveland, right?
Yeah. It's here in Cleveland. It's called the COD, the USS COD. It's next to the Rock Hall. Just a short walk from there.
Interesting. So we've gotten a bit of insight of how you get your inspiration for these environments, these models, these buildings, as it were. I know personally, my experience with your work is not only gawking at the incredible environments and the effects, but standing in awe of your prowess in programming shaders in Unity. And,
Thank you.
If anyone in our audience here is not as familiar with shaders are a form of programming where you teach. I'm going to do my best to give a description here. You're going to have to correct me. You program your game engine how to render things. So you teach it how to paint pixels on a model, how to shade them, so on and so forth.
Yes. The way I think of it is, how does this object react to light? That's usually the terms in which I think about it. Is like you've got an object, you've got light in the scene. Now, how do they go together? Some things, reflect the light in a very precise kind of mirror-like way, and some things kind of make the light all spread out and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Interesting. That's definitely a very physical-based way to think about shaders. I kind of see it as putting in words and numbers until something happens that doesn't look that bad.
Okay,
we've got different approaches.
Started out, I suppose it was like that, which was a very long time ago. But yeah.
For those of us who haven't done much with shaders, it's notorious in the industry, up there with network programming as one of the hardest types of programming to pick up from scratch. So it's definitely it's a skill to be good at it. So we've got a question from 3 Days JPT27. What genre is your game, and how did you decide to go down that path?
So I would describe my game as a sort of a 3D, alternately first person and third person, point and click adventure type of thing. There are some action elements. There's most notably this sort of sword fighting thing. But mostly adventure games type stuff, where you're playing a character with her own personality, and you click on objects in the scene, and she kind of comments on them, and that's how you learn things about the character. Is kind of hearing her react to the world around her. The idea is that, like many point and click adventure games, you have random puzzles you have to solve, and the sort of gimmick, if you may call it that, here is that I want every single puzzle in the game to be character based. So whenever you're solving a puzzle in a video game, you're learning something. Frequently, like if I'm playing a Myst game, I'm learning how these weird steampunky inventions work in these lonely environments and stuff like that. I'm learning something. So what I want here is that I want the learning to be about the characters and about the story and about making this character that you're playing the best version of herself that she can be.
Very much would you describe it as a coming of age or a personal growth kind of deal?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think of it very much. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about the movie Super 8.
Is that a horror film? Am I thinking of the same one?
It's got horror element. Super 8, it's set in the 80s. A bunch of kids there's an alien who crash lands in this small town. These kids are filming a movie or something when it crash lands or something like that. I forgot the details, but yeah, there are definitely horror parts, but it's also coming of age parts. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I do like. I mean, at its core, Tinselfly is supposed to be just a character study. I mean, that's what it is. But my favorite character studies are ones that are simultaneously kind of mundane and intimate, but also a little over the top in how they present these the sort of coming of age stuff that kind of everyone goes through. And I think it's important to kind of present that in a way that's unique and novel, because it can come off as a little done before. So, gotcha. But I think those are lessons that people keep having to learn over and over again, and you have to kind of repackage them in new and interesting ways.
That's an interesting thought about coming of age or these personal growth stories. We don't get bored after hearing the first one, and there's always something to learn the next time you hear it. It's like you need these continuous reminders that we need to be growing and developing as a person. Not to get too philosophical here, right. But would you gel with something like that?
Absolutely. It is about the constant reminders and the constant kind of sneaking in the fact that they are reminders.
Interesting. That's very cool, and I wish you the best in being able to convey that and capture people's interest and capture their their imagination and the mystique of the environment you're creating. And I think you're going to do a good job there.
Thank you.
I'm a little biased, but honest. We'll say that.
Okay. We've
got a question from Brian Wakefield asking, have you used Unity's new shader graph yet?
I am afraid I have not. I'm not sure how much usefulness I'm going to get out of it at this point, since I already know shader programming. I mean, I definitely see the value in something like that. Even if you do already know shader programming. So a while ago, I was experimenting with a system, you might have heard of it, called Playmaker, which is sort of like visual scripting for Unity. And even as someone who's been programming, like I said at the beginning of the show, and since, kindergarten, literally, that sort of thing is valuable, to visually see, what's going on. So I wouldn't dismiss it entirely, but I just haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
That's right, folks. All the stuff you see was made without shader graph. Somehow.
Although mostly what you see now is standard shaders. I started off with everything custom, which was totally overkill. But mostly it's standard shaders now, so it's kind of reined it back a bit.
Very cool. We've got a question here from Stardew Moon. What's your favorite part of game dev, and what do you feel was the most surprising thing you learned in the game dev process?
Ooh. My favorite part. My favorite part is definitely working on the environment art, and that really shows because there's not that much else there right now. Yeah, I like just seeing how these things develop because like we were saying earlier, I don't know how they're going to develop. It's a surprise to me. So I'll have kind of an idea of the feeling I want to create, or maybe like some of the influences I want to bring in, but I don't quite know how they're going to work together. And so I just like that process of discovery, of seeing that stuff kind of come together. So the second half was it. So what's the most surprising thing? Ooh, I'm not gonna have to think about that one for a minute.
No worries. Most surprising thing.
What's the most surprising thing?
I have to think about that myself. I know in my own case, just to build make some time here for you, is the most surprising thing is whenever I make a game or a prototype, and it crosses the threshold of fun. When all of a sudden it's no longer just a bunch of code and you can move left and right and jump, but all of a sudden you don't just want to press play to test it. You keep playing it a little bit. You're exploring, you're discovering in something you've created, and it's no longer just, oh well, that feature works, let's move on. It's I want to jump around a little bit. Like that feeling of fun. So if I had to answer that question, that is how I would answer. What was the most surprising thing I learned?
I guess the most surprising thing for me was the planning doesn't work the way I thought it would. I thought, because I kind of came at this from sort of I guess a waterfall-y kind of approach, where I thought I'd let's take this story, for example. I've been working on this a stupidly long time, and I've been trying to hammer out the details of the story the entire time. And it wasn't coming together, and it wasn't coming together, and I wasn't sure what was going on there. And the best thing, I found out that the best thing I could do in terms of sorting out my thoughts for the story was to work on something else, to work on the music. And that was a really surprising moment when I started learning music composition, is that I found that I could go back and forth between working on the music and working on other parts of the game. And if I had a question about like, why is this character here in the scene or something like that, and I just kind of table it for a while and start working on the music, and then suddenly by working on the music I'd get the answer to my question. Like you'd kind of hear it and kind of say, okay, now given this music, what kind of story fits this music? And then you go back to the story and you work on the story for a while, and then, okay, well, given the story, what kind of music fits this story? And I guess the most surprising thing was learning that all these different disciplines were like feeding off of each other in this really cool way.
Interesting. Very, very iterative in one way, and almost a careful dance between these different elements that come together to create a game. That's cool. We've got a question here from Burns248. I want to get started in game dev, but I'm mainly a developer, not really an artist. How do you think I should get started?
Okay, so you wanted to learn about art. What I would suggest is, and this is something I do a lot, looking at case studies a lot. There are a couple different ways you can go about, learning about art, and you can kind of come at it from this like theory point of view. But if you're not already like thinking in an artist like a visual artist like mindset, that might all feel a little alien. So you can come at it from this other point of view, which is just looking at case studies. And at that point, what we're kind of talking about here is just pattern matching, really. You just say, let's say architecture or something. You look at a work of architecture that everyone says, hey, this is a great work of architecture. So you take it as a given. This is a great work of architecture. Don't try to question that at all. At least not yet. You will eventually. But just look at it and say, okay, I have this this pile of things that people say all these things are really cool. Now, what do they have in common? What makes this, what makes them all similar and stuff like that. So you kind of go at it from this very, very generalized point of view, and that might work. If you don't consider yourself that artistic a person, and you can kind of think in terms of templates. Once you start looking at all these things, you can start thinking in terms of templates and patterns and things like that. And it's like, okay, if I want something that looks kind of sad and moody, I'm going to use this kind of color palette because I've seen this specific color palette in other works before, and you just kind of think in terms of those templates. And I think that might be a good way to get started.
I would definitely second that. Burns, if you're looking to get started, find all the references you can. If there's a type of genre you're looking for, buy those games, start playing them. I was working on a bullet hell for a short time, and lucky for me, Steam had a bullet hell bundle. So I bought a bunch of those, I played a bunch of those, realized that I didn't like bullet hells that much, and moved on. But finding this material that is kind of matching the mood or the gameplay, the visual style that you're looking for or you're interested in looking into, in my case, and studying it, see what is in common. What makes this genre of game? What colors, what feelings, what sounds? And I would even encourage you, try replicating it. Like, try to recreate small pieces of it until you recapture that feeling. And then go from there and build off of it and make something entirely new and your own that you can surprise the world with.
Exactly. And another point I want to bring up is, like, people kind of split the world into, like, oh, these are technical people and these are artist people, and I kind of don't see the world that way. I kind of object to those kind of dichotomies. You can use it as a programmer. There's a good chance your analysis skills are good. You're good at taking a problem and breaking it up into little pieces, and those skills, you use exactly the same skills. When doing art, art is still problem solving. If you have a problem to solve, you have a mood you want to create, you have tools you have to learn to use and things like that. And you have to break it up into pieces and use those skills that you already have to create great art.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that wonderful question. We've got another one here from Steve F. Any tricks for staying focused long term on a project like this, or has it just come naturally?
It has not come at all naturally. So a long time ago, I was really, really jumping back and forth between projects, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And none of them were really getting anywhere. And in fact, I still have many of them around that I still kind of poke at every now and then because, they're still very much in progress. None of them ever got done. Tinselfly is my first game. I will have completed when I complete it, hopefully. So I kind of had to force myself to work on that. So when I sat down to work on something, I was going to work on that. And it wasn't about long-term commitment, because that can be a little scary. And I would never have volunteered for the kind of long-term commitment that I have eventually put into this project, because we're talking about something that I kind of started toying with in at least as far back as 2001. So a very, very long time ago. So if you asked me, hey, do you want to start working on a project that's going to take you, 20 years to complete? Obviously I'd say no. That would be absurd. But you don't think about it in those terms. You just think about it in terms of when you sit down, the moment you sit down, you're going to work on something. It might as well be the thing you were working on last week, or yesterday or whatever. And you just every day, keep doing that and I try not to think too hard about the long-term time that I'm putting into that.
Awesome. My goodness, I can definitely speak from my own experience. When it comes to staying focused, you gotta find your own way, because I've read a lot of guides and a lot of tips and tricks on how to do it myself, and none of them have worked for me. Maybe one or two, and those I've hung on to and said, okay, I've got to wake up early. I've got to make sure I've got the good breakfast. I got to make sure I've got clear goals. And I encourage you to find as many different ways you can. Study yourself. What motivates you to do other things? And see if you can apply that to your work when it comes to a long-term project. And I think you'll be surprised what you can accomplish.
Also, I want to add that since I am one of the people in chat here mentioned being a one person team. I'm also, at least up until this point, a one person team. Although I'm hoping to change that pretty soon here. But part of that is having things to switch back and forth between. Like I said earlier, there's music, there's art, there's programming, there's story writing, which is its own skill, and you can kind of, if you're the sort of person who naturally wants to be fickle about it, and I am, you can still be fickle about it by going back and forth between wearing these different hats, and you can procrastinate on modeling by working on music, and kind of that's a way to keep things moving, and in some ways focus becomes not required at a certain point.
It no longer becomes a struggle to stay focused, is what you're saying?
Yeah. Because you can go back and forth because all these different kinds of things need to be done.
Interesting. I think of it kind of like when I've got homework to do back in college, and what I would do is set my homework down on the table and then go clean something. Or I would set it down and then go talk to a friend I haven't talked with in a while, because I'd think, like, I can put that off. Like, I need to get this out of the way. Like, I haven't, dusted the top of my door frames in a while. Like, when the approach you're talking about is like these distractions are things that are equally as important. So all of a sudden, when it's I'm hit a roadblock with my code, it's let me give it a second, and I'll just focus on some art for a while or some sound and distract myself there. Because all of a sudden, your distraction is no longer a distraction. It's an avenue to the same end. Something like that?
Absolutely. That's a very good way of putting it.
Very cool. All right, we've got a question from 3 Days JPT27 asking, what games are your favorite and inspired you the most?
So Myst, the original Myst game, was a big inspiration for me. Just the weirdness and wackiness of that world, and the whole idea at the time of being immersed in the world on a computer screen was pretty new and amazing, at the time. Along with the whole idea of telling this story, through the design of the environments and through how the player reacts to the environments and stuff like that. So that was a big one. The Longest Journey is much more directly related to what I'm trying to do here, because it itself is a kind of a character-driven point-and-click adventure game, and that's definitely one of my favorites. Sadly, I tried replaying it a while ago. It doesn't run so great on modern computers, so you can't really click on things, but if you can somehow get it to run, I'd still recommend it. So there's that. I think what else? Grim Fandango was another really narrative heavy kind of experience, and all of these things I guess have something in common in that they surprised me. In saying, okay, I didn't realize computer games could affect me in the way that these computer games did.
Interesting.
Visually, sorry.
Go right ahead.
I was just going to say visually, I'm taking a lot from Bioshock Infinite here, in terms of the look, the softness of the lighting, and the not really like hyper real look, but the not really cartoony either. That sort of in between kind of place. Whenever I go to expos and stuff, people always say, "Oh, that looks like Bioshock," or "Oh, that looks like Myst." So it's always one or the other. One day, someone said both. So
Not bad. If I can ask real quick, you mentioned Myst. Have you played many games in the Myst series? Do you have a favorite?
I have played all the games in the Myst series, and also Abduction, the new game from the creators of Myst.
Oh, sick.
My favorite. This is probably an unpopular answer, but I really liked Myst 3, which wasn't even developed by the original team that developed Myst. It was just the sort of thing, where it was a kind of a licensed kind of deal. But I don't know, there was something about the way they did the puzzle design that was interesting. Like there's a puzzle where there's a small animal and a little piece of fruit in a cage, and the obvious thing you're supposed to do is like trap the animal in the cage. And I forget the details, but the correct solution to the puzzle is to not trap the animal in the cage and to do something else. And I forget what that was, but I
Hmm.
just thought that was really cool.
Oh man, those were definitely. I didn't grow up playing much Mist and Riven, but my father did, and getting to watch those puzzles and the photorealistic environments there, and the kind of unsettling atmosphere where you think something's gonna jump out and get you, but they tell you from the beginning, I mean, you're alone. Nothing's here to hurt you. Just an interesting
Yeah,
kind of atmosphere.
yeah. The whole non-violent aspect was a real draw for me for those games.
Very.
And I guess if we're talking about inspiration,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of hard not to talk about the whole, you know, place these games have in culture, and not just the experience as it was when you played it. So I remember flipping through Time magazine when I was a kid, and there was like this full page ad. It was a Gap ad with the creators of Myst doing a Gap ad, and I thought that was just the most amazing thing because at the time, video games were not exactly well respected in
Right.
the world, and here are these two guys, doing an ad, and it was very classy looking, and
Right.
that I. I'd be lying if I said that that wasn't in some ways an inspiration. Seeing that ad, for Gap.
Hmm. Very cool, very cool. I want to find that out if I can, because that, that long ago for games to be in that much of the public eye is incredible. Man, we've got a question here from Burns248. Is it common in indie game dev to use agile methodologies like Scrum?
um, I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that. I don't use any kind of like formalized methodology when I'm working on my game because, like I said, I'm just a one-person thing at the moment. So I don't know. Maybe Zach would know more than me.
Oh man. So I took a wonderful senior software development design course back in college, and I'm happy to say that I remember just about none of it. And we did talk about agile design and Scrum, and although I'm on a team of two with publishers we work with and a lot of people that we hire to do music and other jobs that we can't do, um, we really don't have a good formula for how we get projects or milestones done.
Yeah.
I imagine it's become something very similar to agile and this iteration milestone kind of
Mhm.
methodology. I
Yeah.
definitely encourage it because it's been proven to be one of the best designs over waterfall or
Right.
the one thing I remember from that class, Big Bang design methodologies, which is the art of just doing everything at once and then pressing play at the end,
Okay.
which never works.
It
So,
never works, but it sounds very familiar.
oh, it sounds like the best way to do things because it's your
Yeah.
code. You know it works. You don't have
Yeah.
to test it.
I I guess the way I approach things is just I try very hard to develop a very good awareness of where the project is and what I need to do next, on a moment to moment basis, and that's really the way I see it. And there's nothing more formal to it than
Hmm.
that. It's just having a good sense of, is what I'm doing right now productive, or should I be working on something else? And just asking that question, literally like every 5 minutes.
Hmm. Easy enough. It's very similar to how I run my Trello board. I probably reorganize my Trello board more often than I move tasks from the doing into the done pile. But it works out in the end. We're getting builds done, and I assume there's something new to show off at the next Cleveland Game Developer meeting. And if it works, let's see. I've got a quick question here. If you've got any more questions in chat for Brian Crick, developer of Tinselfly, please feel free to post them below and we will get to them. I've got a question for you, though, Brian,
Okay.
since I am constantly enamored with your shader abilities. What would you describe as the most interesting shader effect you've seen in
That
a
I've
game?
seen.
Or maybe a visual effect in a game that you've seen?
Mm. Ooh, that's tough. Um, I've just been playing. This is one of those things that's easy. I find it interesting because it's easy to not notice. I've recently been playing, and this is going to sound very unlike me, Hellblade.
Hmm.
Um, and there are these environments where you have these little gates that you can walk through, and the environment you can see through the gate is subtly different than the environment you see outside of the gate. It could be as simple as like you look through the gate, or you're outside of the gate, and there's a wall in front of you, and there's a tower, and there's a whole bunch of debris in front of the tower. And when you're looking through the gate, the debris disappears.
Mm.
And sometimes, yeah, I don't notice it at first, and so I have to kind of walk back and forth, looking at the gate and looking at the other side of the gate and seeing, okay, what's different? Do I really want to walk through this, or do I want to save this for later? It was interesting just in that I didn't notice it at
Mm.
first. So it's nothing really flashy or anything, but I know looking at it, it's like, wow, that must have been really hard to do.
Oh boy, that's how I look at most things that aren't a diffuse or surf shader. Crud. We I can speak from my own experience trying waiting. What was it? It was 2 months to write a shader so that my characters, when they walk behind a wall, would show a little colored silhouette, so you could still see them
Right.
and you'd know where your character is at all times. And I remember bringing some of that to you and being like, ah, crap. I'm in the kiddie pool right now, and I should I should need to be at the 2-story diving board before I can attempt stuff like this. We'll get there eventually. Shaders comes to you. It's just
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
another way of thinking.
Mhm. Another cool thing I remember seeing was I think it was for Overwatch,
Hmm.
which I haven't played myself. But some of the environments in Overwatch, um, they use shaders to like blend textures together in a really interesting way. So like I
Hey,
don't know, you'll
Marie.
have like oh, my wife Marie, say hi. Welcome to the show.
I didn't know you were doing a thing, and I was just checking out what it was.
Okay.
Welcome. Maria does a lot of writing and can do some writing for games. So I've
Yeah,
heard.
yeah. Marie will be writing my dialogue. So she's an excellent dialogue writer.
Awesome. Let's see. Something about shaders. I can't remember where we were.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, watch. I forget what the specific example I was reading about was, but say you had like some sand on one part of the environment and some bricks on the other part of the environment, and you wanted a nice transition between the sand and the bricks. I mean, you could just crossfade the sand and the bricks, but that would be kind of weird looking. It wouldn't look quite right. It would look like the sand was like semi-transparent or something like that.
Right.
So they had like these height maps where they could say, okay, the brick has a sort of height map on it, and the sand would kind of creep into the lower parts of the height map, so that like the spaces between the bricks. So you'd see the sand, completely on top of the bricks, and then you'd see it like partially on top of the bricks, and then you'd see it just in the crevices between the bricks, and then you wouldn't see the sand at all. So it was this very natural.
What? Oh gosh, like a kind of a bump map or normal map that fades in based on the texture of the texture that's there already?
Yeah, exactly. And after seeing that, I implemented a similar thing in this ice rink in one of the environments in my game where there's snow on the ground. And yeah, there's snow and there's cobblestones, and the snow kind of slowly melts away, and you just see it and the grooves between the cobblestones before it just fades out completely.
Oh gosh. That's something else. Like I've come to the point where I'm like, okay, so they used a texture to show where it should fade in first based on the distance, and there's a couple normal maps. I'm gonna stop here quick because we're getting some rapid fire questions, it seems.
Okay.
First, from those toasty oats, Brian, what's your favorite color or non-color?
What's my favorite color and non-color? Sort of a grayish blue. If I were to express it in terms of like a color picker in Photoshop or Illustrator, I'd say, a hue of 210, a saturation of 50, and a brightness of 50. So.
All right. If you need that color code, send us a message after the stream. We've got a question from those Toasty Oats. I'll go with this one first. What are each of your favorite games to play on PC?
Which are my favorite games to play? That I'm like playing right now?
Sure.
Let me think. Actually, I haven't been playing a lot lately. I liked Tron Runner. It's this infinite runner with a Tron theme. It was very easy to pick up and play. And it's just the sort of thing I can play for like 20 minutes, as a nice break. If I want something, ever. Okay. Ever? Like I said, as far as my inspirations go, The Longest Journey was definitely one of them. I have great memories of so we got Longest Journey. I got it as like a Christmas present, and I was on, Christmas break, and we just kind of busted through the whole game. It was like a 50-hour game, or something like that, and we busted through it during Christmas break. With my family, we were all sitting around the computer, and deciding what the character is going to do next and all that. And that was just a really, really fun experience. I really liked that. So it's something we've tried to recapture every now and then. It hasn't ever quite come back. We've tried it with the sequels, and it's like we can't. It was just this like a moment in time where we could do that, and now you get older, life gets busier. It's hard to do that sort of thing. But Longest Journey is definitely one of my favorites I've ever played. Another one, which isn't necessarily like an inspiration for Tinselfly or anything, but it's still one of my favorite games, is something called Oddworld. Have you heard of it?
Is that Abe's Odyssey, right?
Abe's Odyssey. Yeah, side-scrolling, kind of puzzle platformer type of thing, where you're rescuing, your fellow slaves from some sort of bizarre meatpacking plant. And I just love the design of that, and it had this really weird, offbeat sense of humor, which I really loved.
Let's see. If I had to answer that, favorite games to play on PC. I've been really enjoying Enter the Gungeon right now, and we'll be playing some of that after stream because a new update just dropped today. Hang out after the Q&A. And shoot, Overwatch. As much as I don't play it because I don't give it enough time, just the characters and the environments and the atmosphere all coming together just scratches the itch that I haven't scratched since Team Fortress 2. We got a few more quick questions here. Brian Wakefield asks, are you sad about LeBron leaving?
I don't think about it too much. I don't. To be honest, I don't follow basketball all that much. So yeah.
All right. Have you ever eaten at the Melt?
Have I? Yes, we are in fact walking distance. This house I'm in right now is walking distance from the Cleveland Heights Melt. We don't go there that often, but we have occasionally if we feel like being very, very full for like a week afterwards.
Oh my, yes. You got a favorite sandwich?
I don't know if I have one in particular. I don't know if we've been there that often enough for me to have picked a favorite at this point. They're all just so, I don't know, dizzying.
All right, we got a question from Brian Wakefield. Favorite beer from Great Lakes Brewing Company?
I don't have one. I don't drink. So
easy enough. Well, I can give my answer, which is the same. Let's see here. We've got a question from Burns248, which is, how long have you both been developing games?
Okay, so this is the question where I tell you how old I am.
Oh no!
Because most people don't realize this. Let's do the math here. I gotta open up calculator here. Let's see.
All right, folks, we're bringing out the big guns.
Okay, so I'm thinking I started in, what is it, 2018? I probably started around 1983.
Goodness gracious. That's awesome.
It would have been, so about 35 years. Now, when you say, how long have you been making games? There's obviously a lot of definitions for making games. When I was making games, in 1983, I would have been, 7 years old. I was kind of playing around with the computer and I made things that were game-like. But that's how I got started, and it's been a very gradual process since then. And there hasn't really been a line where I said, now I make games. It's just something that's kind of always been there.
I would probably answer in a similar way, add 10 or 15 years. But I started making custom campaigns for StarCraft with their little editor that came packaged with the game. So I would create units with special stats, and if you stand in a certain place, you'd buy an item, or so on and so forth. Those use map settings maps I loved, and it was my dream to create something that would play a lot like an RPG, a top-down role-playing game in StarCraft, before moving on to Team Fortress 2 stages and action script and flash animations. But that was probably, shoot, I want to say had to be 6 or 8, so late 90s is
Okay.
when I began, and then yeah, actually I'd say before then because I was making paper games before that.
Okay. It's really cool to hear, other people, answer that question. Because like I'm now imagining, growing up in a world where when you're little, you can mod something like StarCraft, and have fun with that. Because that's obviously that's not something I could have done when I was a kid. That's not something that really happened.
Yeah. Oh man, it was different and exciting and very hard to use. But when you're young and you got all the time in the world, like you'll spend the hour it takes to make your character run a little faster. All right. Let's see. We've got a lot of love for Melt in the chat right now.
I
Columbus.
see that. Wow.
Goodness gracious. Have we got any final questions for Brian? Maybe one more. If we get one real quick here, or else I will come up with one. We can look at some of these incredible backgrounds for a short time. I really love the city streets we've got here. I think this was one of the last screenshots on
That
the
is one of
website.
my absolute favorites because when I started trying to figure out what I wanted, it's all verbal, in terms of describing what I want. Like I said, there's no concept art or anything. So just verbally, I said, okay, I want something that looks like the Paris you see in the photographs of Versailles, from like, I think that's around 1920 or 1930 or so, mashed together with Tron. and that was my concept. And I really never, going back to that whole things that surprise you thing, I never really saw what that might look like until I saw, well, first of all, that ice rink, which is up, I'm seeing it right now. But you see that there's that spherical ice rink with a glowing ring above it. So that's the first time I really implemented something that kind of expressed that. And then later on, the city street with the glowing pavement and stuff kind of worked in kind of a natural way. Was another extension of that. It was like, okay, yeah, this can work. Because when I kind of verbally come up with an idea like that, you never quite know if it's going to work or not. Or if like, maybe you'll get it done and realize, oh, hey, this looks exactly like this other thing, and I didn't even realize it because I was just expressing it verbally,
All right, we've got our last few questions, so we'll keep them a little quick. We've got a couple from Stardew Moon. Have you been to GDEX? And if so, because I think you have, what is your favorite part of GDEX?
I have been to GDEX a few times. First couple times I just went to see the talks, and a couple times after that I was demoing Tinselfly at the Cleveland Game Devs table over there. Really enjoy it. It's a great experience. Favorite part of GDEX is just walking around the expo floor, just seeing the amount of creativity on display, just the different ideas that people get excited about when they're making their different kinds of games, and learning what excites people and what they're passionate about and what they're willing to spend their time on when they're doing this whole indie dev thing, which is such a commitment. And it's just, you have to be really passionate about something, and it's every time it's different, and I love seeing that.
Sick. We got a question from those toasty oats. Favorite course ever taken while in school?
Course in school, definitely this filmmaking course, and not filmmaking, but film studies course that I took in college. It was just a broad overview of just the art of film, and I just learned so much about narrative design and scene composition and music and all sorts of things from that class that have helped me definitely with game design.
Very cool.
Most of my inspiration comes from film, not so much from other games. It really comes from film.
Well, not bad. plenty of places to get your artistic inspiration. So those aspiring game devs in the chat, like, find art that you enjoy. Use that for your games. We've got last two questions. What is the coolest thing you've gained from experiences like GDEX?
Like GDEX. The best thing I've gained is just kind of going back to the previous answer, getting to know the other people, and getting to see all these other points of view on game design and what's important to different people. And I think it's really neat just to see how you're different and embrace those differences, and learn from them in the best way you can.
Okay, yeah. And finally, what's the elevator pitch for Tinselfly?
Oof. I need to work on that. I would say Tinselfly is a narrative-driven adventure, with a heavy focus on expressing character and story through puzzle design, I guess, is where I'm at right now with that.
All right, awesome. And that is Tinselfly. That is the game that Brian Crick here is working on, which any tentative dates I can pull from you?
Dates?
When can we expect to learn more about this game? Or
we're shooting for early 2020 right now.
Awesome. And very cool. Well, hey, that's all the time we have for Q&A here. So, Brian, thank you so much for answering some questions, hanging out, and talking a bit.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me here. It's been fun.
Well, hey, can we send some links and some websites out to the chat and anybody watching this video on YouTube back home?
Actually, the first one I wanted to send out is not mine. If you're interested in shaders, there's this great person on Twitter.
Is that Joyce, Minions Art?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. She is absolutely amazing. And yeah, I have a website. You can, since I hope to get back to doing regular dev blogs over there. But I've got a website over here. I can paste in the chat. There you go.
Sick. I will paste the link on that website to Tinselfly as well. So if you want to get a description of some of the screenshots you've been seeing here, you want to look at them more, head on over there. I've got your Twitter and the Tinselfly Twitter. I can throw those up real quick. So
okay.
Get those follows going. And anything else you'd like to send at them? Anything related to you or your games?
I can't think of anything at the moment. No.
All right. Well, if you do, I can throw it in the description later. I think that just about wraps it up. So, chat, thank you so much for coming and participating in this Q&A in the lounge with Brian Crick, developer of Tinselfly. We loved having you, Brian. Thank you so much for answering our questions. And if you are interested in stuff like this, chat, feel free to give this channel a follow. We will try to do these about once a week with new and exciting people in the game development world. And if you'd like to stay in contact with Brian, myself, and others, you can check out our Discord below or hit us up on Twitter. I think that's about it. So thank you again, Brian, and have a good night.
Hey, thank you. Good night.
All right, we'll see everybody.